So there are two loose heads just floating around in here somewhere?
You can hear them at night. They whisper to each other and then cry.
Since our host isn't here, would anyone care to mix me a drink?
Horror films ask us many questions. Who will survive and what will be left of them? Who's going to believe a talking head? What's blood for if not for shedding? Do you like scary movies? Have you checked the children? Maybe we'll find the answers together. Thank you for joining us on Photo Flow, Terror in the Smiles. Here are your hosts, Eric Jones and Jake Almond.
Good evening. I'm your host.
Hit us off with the fog, man.
All right, so we have another haunted town. This time we're going to go from the East Coast to the West Coast to California for 1980's The Fog, directed by John Carpenter, who also co-wrote the film with Debra Hill. So he and Debra Hill also, everyone knows, created Halloween. And this I have seen, and I've always enjoyed this because it's actually one of the horror films that it's actually structure-wise, it's kind of like the whole opposite of Salem's Lot. We had just talked about how Salem's Lot is a bit of a slow burn and everything. The Fog really sort of gives you all. The Fog doesn't waste any time getting into its plot, and it gets into the plot and it gives you all the information pretty much as soon as possible.
I love that too. Probably my favorite exposition in a ghost story right there at the beginning.
Yeah, it's 90 minutes. You're not waiting around to get the mystery of what happened. You get it right at the as soon as the film starts, you're getting it, and you're getting all the action to start right then and there, and it kind of moves at a breakneck speed. It's almost over too quick at times. But this one is also about a town that holds a secret. What's the town's name? Antonio Bay.
Antonio Bay. Yeah.
Yep. Antonio Bay. Years
with Stevie Ray.
What was it? 100 years ago or something like that. The founders of the town basically sunk this other ship because it was carrying lepers, and it was trying the crew. What's the ship called? The Elizabeth Dane.
Yeah, and I'm sorry. Hold on one second. It's Stevie Wayne. I'm an idiot, and I don't want you guys to yell at me. So anyway, go ahead.
But the owner of the ship, Blake, wanted to establish a leper colony nearby, and the original founders of Antonio Bay basically had the ship sunk so that they wouldn't have any lepers nearby, and they stole the money that was the gold that was on the ship to basically build up the town, and
it was 6 conspirators.
Yep. And then so basically the spirits of the dead lepers, the Fog is their return to get their revenge. So it's a real simple story, and it starts off like that. And so pretty much the only thing that you really as an audience member kind of have to do is you'll get the story, and you're just here to watch to make sure your characters, your favorite characters survive. And, it's got a heck of a cast.
Yes, it does. Holy crap. It's a lot of Halloween people too coming back.
We already know it's John Carpenter and Debra Hill coming back. We have, for cinematography, we have Dean Cundey coming back. Carpenter did his own music as he's been known to do. We have Tommy Lee Wallace, who on editing, who we talked about with the Lost episode.
Yep, and we'll talk about him again when we do cover Halloween eventually.
Yep. And then you get into the cast, you have Adrienne Barbeau, and then we have, of course, from Halloween, Jamie Lee Curtis, and then we also have another. We not only have Jamie Lee Curtis, but we get her mother, Janet Leigh, as well. And we talked about Janet Leigh when we discussed Psycho.
Yep. Charles, did you say Charles Cyphers yet? Oh, you got Charles Cyphers Sheriff Brackett.
Yep. And then we have Tom Atkins, who every time
I already know what you're gonna say. I already know it. Go ahead.
Well, so here's my thing. Every time I watch this, I always think he's Donald Sutherland. Oh, I
didn't know that's what you were gonna say.
Yeah. Oh no. Yeah. That's who I always
say that.
Tom Atkins needs his mustache the way Riker needs his beard. I'm just saying. Oh my god, I was so thrown off. I was like, I don't remember him not having a mustache in this. What is happening?
That good point. Yeah, see me. Every time I see him, I always think Donald Sutherland's in this movie. I was like, all right, it's Jamie Lee Curtis and Donald Sutherland. But yeah, this is definitely The Fog. Just as far as production. Oh God, I forgot. And then we have Nancy Keys as Annie from Halloween. So this whole film has been. Oh, and in the beginning we have an uncredited cameo of Carpenter himself.
Oh yeah, and I forgot about that too. And it's so funny because he looks exactly like my Uncle Ron.
Yeah, so the Fog is basically a Halloween, a whole Halloween reunion. And funny thing is, I was just reading it's like most John Carpenter works, it wasn't received well, although it did do well box office wise, but as always, they were kind of mixed, reception critically, and then over time it got reevaluated, and I don't think it's as strong as Halloween or The Thing or anything else or They Live, but it's certainly an underrated piece of Carpenter, and you can, as you watch it, you can kind of feel where him and Hill kind of took the lessons they learned from making Halloween, and were able to create this one. Because so if you think about it, almost kind of structure wise, it is almost like Halloween in that regard. Not to talk too much about Halloween, until we actually discuss it, but Halloween also sort of gives its main exposition right at the beginning. We learn about who Michael Myers is, and he breaks out, and then pretty much the movie is in full flow after that. And The Fog kind of works a lot the same way.
Yeah, and it does kind of follow a slasher structure. I think that I agree 100%. It struck me this watch. First of all, it has the mood and the atmosphere just in Dean Cundy's cinematography and everything else, the music, everything. It just has this wonderful atmosphere that that's what I want from a ghost story. And in the opening up with the campfire ghost story is just, everybody can relate to that. And I don't know many people that haven't been around a fire at some point and told a ghost story. It's just a classic human experience, right? And okay, well, come on. I don't. I'm an indoor kid too, but I do like a good bonfire in the fall. But I'm out in the country too, so it has the look and feel of I think the reason why I love the X-Files so much is it has that. I think it borrows a lot from Dean Cundey and John Carpenter's style. Like it just has that feel, and even the Mark Snow music from the X-Files has that very Carpenter-ish, kind of score, and I think that's part of the atmosphere is what draws me back to it, and The Fog is no different. One of the things that struck me with The Fog this time around is I was like, I'm every time, and I don't watch this every year, usually like 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5 years sometimes between watching The Fog, and every time I watch it, I'm thinking it is a slow burn. This is a slow burn, but I always like it. Then I actually forget, like you said, it kind of deceitfully feels like it's going to be a slow burn, and then there's never a moment where something is not happening. Like it's like a haunted house where every so often every time you kind of get lulled into comfort, something happens and it kind of jolts you back, and it's not gory. It's not overly scary, but it's just really satisfying. And it's definitely, I would agree with you. It's not in my top 5. It might not even make, I don't know. I haven't really ever sat down. I mean, I think I have ranked Carpenter, but I'd probably re-rank it if I had to do it on the spot. Because watching his movies at different times means, different things to me. But it's just every time I watch it, I'm like, man, I really enjoy this more than I remembered enjoying it. Like, I always remember that I like it. I always forget just how much I like it. It's just a weird kind of a thing. And I think that might be why, because it's not an obvious masterpiece or anything. It's just a really solid, fun movie. And I'm a sucker for Debra Hill and John Carpenter. And this feels, and R.I.P. Debra Hill, man, like she really did contribute a lot to the Carpenter's career, as far as they were a great partnership. As far as making these cool movies, and as a producer in general, she produced some other stuff that I like too. But anyway, it just, watching it this time, I was thinking the best comparison I could have is like if you're talking about Hitchcock, The Birds. It reminds me of The Birds. Like I always forget, like I'm not a huge Birds fan. Like it's not one of my favorite movies of all time or anything, and I would consider it like, I know it was super famous, but it just feels like lesser Hitchcock to me. But then when I watch it, I'm like, I get why people like this. I'm not scared of birds, but every time I see a bunch of birds together, I think about Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds, and I think that's a lot of people for generations could say that maybe saw it on TV when they were a kid or whatever. You can't help but think about it. And if I'm on, especially if I'm when I lived at the coast, when I see fog roll in, I'm thinking about John Carpenter's The Fog, and I think that I'm not inherently scared of fog. Like I'm not walking around, like I have camped out in the woods and I have had fog roll in while I was camping, and it doesn't like creep me out or anything. But I think in the movie it works as an eerie thing, and I think the same thing with Hitchcock's The Birds. And then I've actually made that observation while watching it this time. I was like, this is kind of like Carpenter's The Birds. Like it's some people really love it and think it's scary or whatever, and other people just kind of dismiss it. But when you watch it, it's undeniable that it works, and it shouldn't work, but it works. And then after the movie went off, I was watching through the special features, and the scene at the dock where Jamie Lee and Tom Atkins go to the port and go on that boat and everything, and they're investigating it. That was filmed in the same location as The Birds. I was like, what? Like, it was so funny because I was like, something about this is reminding me of The Birds. And then turns out they used and that location was out of the way. Like, they had to drive about 45 minutes away from where they shot the rest of the movie. The guy who was doing the tour that was talking about it said most likely they drove out of their way just because this was used in The Birds. It was more like a tribute to Hitchcock or an homage. So, even though they don't overtly homage anything, but it's the same location. So there's actually a shot of like the exact same door that one of the characters comes out of. But anyway, very cool, man. I mean, I don't know. I always say that, very cool. But to me, The Fog is very cool, and it works for me. I'm it's maybe a little too comforting to be like a scary movie. Like I honestly feel like it's a fun get a warm blanket and turn the air down kind of a movie. Eat some popcorn or some candy or something in the Halloween season. This is a good one to watch with somebody who's a little squeamish and doesn't really want a lot of gore, just wants a fun little spooky ghost story. Like it works on that level. This one could totally play on television with no editing. You know, even the violence is very tame. Like,
That's what I was thinking. When I was watching it this time from the last time, I was surprised. I was like, I don't know why. I thought I remembered it being more gory than it was, and it wasn't.
aren't you surprised that this doesn't play on TV more though? Like, of course, I don't really watch TV that much, but I feel like this is one that would play so well as like a Friday night movie or something. Or did they not? Did they not do that anymore?
They kind of don't really. I mean, unless most of the time, unless it's just like superhero thing nowadays, but. Yeah, they don't really do too much like that anymore, which is crazy because that Saturday matinee or whatever, that's how I saw The Shining for the first time, edited to hell and back.
Well, dude, both of us saw a lot of stuff that way. I feel like in our childhood, but I just don't think as many people watch TV anymore. Although I did come across that channel the other night that was playing like a whole block of vampire movies, and the next night it was playing a whole block of ghost stories, and the next block it was like Universal monsters and. I was like, okay, that's pretty good. That's cooler than what I had as a kid, you know. Like that, it felt like Peter Vincent's Fright Night or something. It was like all night movie marathons. I don't really ever remember that other than Joe Bob doing it on the movie channel or TNT back in the day. He used to do Monster Vision on TNT when I was a kid, but that's why I like that. If you want like a horror host, like The Last Drive-In on Shudder is a lot of fun just because it has that. It kind of brings that back, But yeah, I mean the Fog just it's a comfort film at this point. It's not as scary as Halloween. Halloween could almost play on TV. Actually, I mean it has played on TV to be fair. But with very, very little editing, you can play it fairly uncut. But there's something about the tone of it that is a lot more disturbing. Kind of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's the horror is in the tone. And I think that the tone of the Fog is a lot more agreeable than the tone of Halloween. You know what I mean? Like I would sit down and watch how the Fog with a 8-year-old or something if they were into ghost stories, but I wouldn't necessarily sit down and watch Halloween with an 8-year-old. You know what I mean? But even edited, so it's just like there is something to be said about what's the purpose of the story and what's the tone of the story, kind of a thing. But yeah, I mean it's cool. I'm a little. I do think that maybe they could have gone. I feel like we've gone 2 weeks in a row now with movies that they could have been a little more visceral. Would it have made a difference if they made the ghosts a little less traditional or old school? Because they seem like very old fashioned, and maybe that was the point. Carpenter was trying to create like a
They don't stand out too much.
the shot in the church is my favorite shot. Like that's a cool shot.
Yeah, I gotta watch it again one day with even my poor transfer of an old DVD has a commentary with Carpenter and Debra Hill. I'm gonna have to give it a listen with that one day.
Yeah, and I think the Blu-ray, the Scream Factory Blu-ray, has that commentary, and it also has a new audio commentary with Adrian Barbeau, Tom Atkins, and the production designer Tommy Lee Wallace himself. So when I send you that, you can listen to that one too. But I've really gotten back into listening to commentaries. All the Wes Craven commentaries are freaking gold, man. I'm just so glad that he recorded one for almost every one of his movies. But yeah, the John Carpenter ones are too. Have you listened to Carpenter and Jamie Lee Curtis with Halloween yet?
Yeah, I listened to that a couple years ago.
Yeah, that one's really fun. There's actually one with John Carpenter and Debra Hill on the old Criterion edition of Halloween, which is out of print now. And I've always wanted that, and that's the one thing that Scream Factory really should have. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe they tried. Knowing them, they probably tried. But I really wish that the Debra Hill commentary for Halloween was on this newest 4K set, because that's like the one feature that's missing. Because I've always wanted to hear it, and maybe it's online somewhere. I could find it, but I haven't ever looked. But yeah, man. Yeah, I agree with you 100%. It might be lesser Carpenter, but lesser Carpenter is better than a lot of other, films. So it's still a lot of fun. But yes, you will appreciate Dean Cundy's cinematography because it's very dark and shadowy. You'll appreciate it so much more when you see it in high definition, for sure.
Yeah, looking forward because yeah,
I know I have that same exact DVD you have. I have that one for years, man, because that was like the best one for a long time.
Yeah, and it's so funny because I've watched it before, and I was like, okay, when now that I finally have a 4K TV, I was like, okay, this'll be all right, and then I popped it in, and I was like, oh my god. I can't wait for that Blu-ray to arrive because I was like,
definitely give it another watch, man, because you'll appreciate the cinematography so much more when you can actually see shit. So, that's one I think that will benefit a lot from anyone that's never watched the Blu-ray or even the 4K that just came out. I'm sure is going to benefit too. But even so, like overseeing it on TV or on DVD back in the day, because I know it's very grainy, especially in the dark scenes, because that's just the way it is with standard definition. It just loses so much detail in the dark, and there is a lot of dark in this movie. So, yeah, and also optical effects. There's not a ton of special effects, but like a lot of the fog effects are optical, and I feel like that would probably look. I haven't watched that DVD in a long time, but I feel like that would look like straight garbage now.
No, it did. I actually had to switch it from the 4K and the 4K player to technically the PS5 is a 4K player, but I had to go to my smaller TV just because it was like I can't look at this thing on a much bigger screen.
Yeah, it cleans it up a little bit to get a smaller TV. Yeah, that's how I love my Tales from the Crypt box set, but and it's not a big deal because it's TV and all that anyway. But it definitely looks better watching it on my computer monitor than it does watching it on my big TV. But yeah, man, I mean, overall, I do think that you will start loving the movie more just simply having the ability to appreciate the cinematography more. But I think that the music and the atmosphere is going to come through no matter what. And when I don't think we talked about the first time we ever saw it. My first time watching this movie was actually, I had gotten back into horror movies a lot, and I was really interested in John Carpenter and had seen Halloween, and I had already bought that and watched it multiple times. And so I saw The Fog was coming on cable or on satellite. We had satellite at the time, and my dad was home. I don't remember why. It wasn't the weekend, but we were both home at the same day. It was just me and him. And Dad likes he likes some horror films. I'm not gonna say he doesn't, but he had kind of gotten away from watching slasher movies and stuff like that. And I always tried to get him to watch slasher movies. I think I got him to watch Scream with me the same night I got my mom to watch it, but he was never really that into slasher movies. And but he doesn't mind a good, monster movie or ghost story or something. So he might not even remember this, but I remember seeing The Fog was coming on like Encore or something, and turning it on and just immediately being gripped by the music because it reminded me of Halloween, and I knew it was Carpenter. That's why I clicked, as I had heard about the movie before, and I just immediately loved the music. And hold on, the cat's rattling the door trying to get out. But we watched it together, and he, it had a lot of actors in it that he likes. He loves Jamie Lee Curtis. He loves Adrienne Barbeau, obviously, but so he was just into it, and I was into it, and we had a good time watching it. So it became immediately one that I was like, okay, this was good. So the next couple of weeks, because that was when I had a job and was buying a lot of horror DVDs anyway, and or just movies in general. I mean, I love movies outside of this genre too, but The Fog was one of those movies that I picked up. That same DVD you have, I picked that thing up back around that time. I want to say that movie specifically came out around the same time as the MGM remaster of Terminator 1. Like, those both came out, like, in the same, like, around the same time. There was a bunch of those MGM catalog movies getting republished. Even though I don't know that The Fog or The Terminator, I know The Terminator wasn't MGM originally, but The Fog, I don't remember who did it originally. But anyway, it doesn't matter. This is all boring to anyone else. But yeah. What was did you say what the first time you ever watched it, what your impression of it was?
First time I ever saw it was when we got that DVD. My father always liked The Fog.
That's funny. We both have stories with our dad with this movie.
Yeah. And the funny thing was, I didn't really know he liked Carpenter, like that. But no, he always liked The Fog, and so he bought that DVD, and we had watched it. We had watched it one day, and so that was kind of like my first experience. And like I said, I had seen Halloween by then. I had seen The Thing by then. I had saw some later movies of his. Vampires. I had seen Vampires by then also. So I had a little Carpenter.
You had seen more Carpenter than me then, because I think somehow or another The Thing was in the middle of its cultural reappraisal, and around the same time as Dad and I watched The Fog, The Thing came on, and I watched that for the first time, and he really liked that too because he's a Kurt Russell fan. So my dad grew up. My dad, one of my dad's favorite movies of all time is Escape from New York. Like, that was the first John Carpenter movie I remember him talking about, because when Escape from LA came out, my dad was like really excited about it, and we were going to church at the time, and it was like one of the few times I can remember my dad being excited, like wanting to get home from church so he could watch a movie, because we grew up watching movies. We had HBO and all that shit, so like it wasn't like anything new to rent movies at the video store. But Escape from LA had come out, and we didn't see it in the theater, and it came out and it had just hit video, and I think my mom rented it because she knew how much my dad wanted to see it. So and it must have been on a Sunday or a Saturday that she went out to the video store, maybe when she was at the grocery store, and rented it. So he was all about us getting back home from church and watching Escape from LA, and I had never seen Escape from New York, but he told me all about it on the way home. He told me all about Escape from New York and I remember in the first scene, Kurt Russell steps out in Escape from LA, my dad was like, he's still got the jacket. It's like, it was such a fanboy moment where he was like, and it's just one of the few times I ever saw my dad just fan out over something like that, like it was just cool because it was nostalgic for him in a way that I don't think I've ever really seen. Like, I'll do that all the time over stuff, but I've never seen my dad just get nostalgic over something. So, because he probably hadn't seen Escape from New York since the early 80s, and so he was just excited to see Snake Plissken again. And so I instantly, as soon as I got the chance to see Escape from New York, I was on it, because I was kind of like not super into Escape from LA the first time I saw it, because I had no context for the type of movie I was watching, and it was so weird. And the whole time I'm trying to think, like, my dad likes camp, like he likes this kind of thing, like he likes this weird shit. Like, it was just a kind of a mind fuck, because it was a bit weirder. Like, I was totally fine with watching weird movies, but I just didn't really think my dad liked silly over the top stuff like that. And then when I finally saw Escape from New York, I'm only talking about it because I don't know when we'll talk about Escape from New York, although we can do non-genre stuff once in a while. But anyway, when I finally saw Escape from New York, I ended up loving it, and I still actually have found myself enjoying Escape from LA now, but at the time I just didn't know how to connect to it. And I didn't know until years later that Big Trouble in Little China was John Carpenter, but I did enjoy watching that one. So I don't know why Escape from LA was such a hard sell to me, because Big Trouble in Little China is super weird too. But it used to come on Saturday afternoon, and it just was a weird movie, and I liked it. Going forward to when The Thing came on, and I don't remember if I even talked about this on our episode, because we talked about 3 movies, so I don't know if I ever got to this. But when I watched it with my dad for the first time, I think my mom might have been there, but I just remember my dad's reaction to that, because he really liked Kurt Russell, and he talked about Kurt Russell played Elvis one time in a movie. It turns out that's a John Carpenter movie too. So, you know, I've never seen that one to this day. That's like one of the few Carpenter movies I've never seen. But, yeah. So that's that was a really long, like, I guess Carpenter is just one of those movies or one of those directors that, whether my dad could talk about John Carpenter as like an individual, as like, oh, he did this and this and this. And he liked more Carpenter movies than he might have liked any of these other horror guys. You know, like I doubt my dad could tell you his favorite Wes Craven movie, but he could tell you his favorite John Carpenter movie without, you know, like if you mention Escape from in New York, he's gonna be, oh yeah, I love that movie. You know, so that's kind of cool because that, you know, Carpenter did have appeal outside of the horror genre, because I don't think Dad gives two shits about Halloween, you know, but he loved.
Same with mine. Yeah, so those were the Fog and Salem's Lot. Yeah, I figured, I was like, let me finally knock Salem's Lot off, and I was looking around my shelves trying to figure out what would fit. I was like, I mean, even though I'd never seen Salem's Lot, I knew what it was about in a way, and I was like, what could fit with it? And then I saw the Fog, and I was like, okay, yeah.
I think you made a good choice, man. Thematically, I totally get it. When you first sent it, I was just like, yeah, I like both of those movies. Let's do it. I hadn't really thought about thematically, like they do work really well together. I think that, you know, you could do more obvious things like The Mist and The Fog. That would have been kind of fun too. Or even The Birds. I think, strangely enough, The Birds would have been a fun double feature with it too. But I think that Salem's Lot and The Fog works great, and they both are more style over gore, you know, like or suspense and mood over gore, I guess you could say.
No, I'd agree.
But yeah, I mean, very good choices, man, and perfect for this time of year. So next week, one of the movies that I picked specifically was because it's a blind spot for me. I've never seen it, so two movies that I've seen a bunch of times, and one that I've never seen at all. So I think you've seen all three of them, but I'm looking forward to talking. And I'm not going to say what they are. Just tune in next week and we'll talk about them. So, but I'm excited, man. I'm looking forward to the last 2 months of season 1 on Photo Flow. Actually have some of my favorite movies that I've been dying to talk about. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, we got a hell of a lineup.
Yeah, man. I appreciate you talking to me for this long, and sorry that it took up a lot more of the evening than I think we both intended just because of technical difficulties, but I appreciate it, man.
Yep, no problem. Same it.
All right, dude. I'll talk to you later on.
All right, man.